In April 2022, a quiet town in the heart of Alabama, Lauderdale, became the stage for one of the most shocking escape cases in recent American history. It all began within the walls of the Lauderdale County Jail, where a man whose name was already known to local authorities for all the wrong reasons was being held, Casey Cole White. Accused of serious crimes, including aggravated murder, he was considered a high-risk prisoner, which meant his violent criminal record and long list of offenses required constant supervision. Casey Cole White wasn't just another inmate serving time or awaiting trial. He carried with him a past marked by violent acts and repeated offenses, making him a detainee under special watch inside the local prison system. His criminal file was extensive, filled with records of robberies, physical assaults, domestic violence, and other behaviors that demonstrated a pattern of dangerous conduct. At the time he decided to plan his escape, Casey was being held without bail, meaning he had not yet been formally convicted of the crime he was accused of. He faced charges related to the alleged murder of a woman during a robbery the previous year. While he denied involvement, the evidence collected by authorities was strong enough to keep him behind bars until the day of his trial. Despite being a relatively small facility, the Lauderdale County Jail housed inmates with a wide range of backgrounds, but few were as complicated as Casey's. The structure of the jail was modest, lacking the tall walls or sophisticated security cameras found in larger federal or state prisons. This, combined with the prisoner's profile, created a potentially delicate environment. The fact that Casey was under custody while awaiting trial increased the risk of escape attempts even further. Prisoners who feel threatened by the possibility of a long sentence often try to flee before the verdict is given. And unfortunately, this seemed to be exactly what happened. But what really caught attention wasn't just the fact that Casey had escaped. After all, escapes happen all over the world. What truly surprised everyone was how he managed to leave that jail, and especially who helped him carry out that bold plan. If you thought the escape was something improvised, done in the heat of the moment, you couldn't be more wrong. Later investigations would reveal that everything was carefully planned, weeks, perhaps months in advance. And the most shocking part? He didn't act alone. Who helped him was no less than someone who should have ensured the prison rules were followed. Vicky White. She was an experienced correctional officer, with decades of public service, responsible for supervising security and the well-being of the inmates. No one could have imagined she'd be involved in something so serious. Vicky was 56 years old at the time and had worked in Alabama's prison system for many years. She was respected by her colleagues and known for her dedication to her work. Her life seemed to follow a peaceful path, until suddenly, she found herself involved in a plan that would forever change her career, reputation, and freedom. Her relationship with Casey had been growing in the months prior to the escape. Frequent conversations, message exchanges, and a certain level of trust had been established. But what exactly led an exemplary public servant to risk everything for a prisoner? That is one of the questions we will explore throughout this video. Many speculated about emotional or romantic motivations. Others suggested psychological manipulation by Casey. Regardless of the reason, the fact is that she decided to help him in a plan that involved deceiving the very system she had dedicated her life to serving. The escape itself would be carried out using an official vehicle from the prison itself. A car belonging to the prison administration, usually used by officers for transporting inmates or patrolling, would be the chosen means to get Casey out. And worse, with the full cooperation of a staff member. That was only possible because Vicky held a position of trust within the institution. As a supervisor, she had access to keys, vehicles, and sensitive information that would normally be out of reach for a regular inmate. She knew exactly the guard shift schedules, where the camera blind spots were, and how to leave without raising suspicion. With these advantages, Casey had all the conditions necessary to leave the prison unnoticed. On April 29, 2022, the plan went into action. While the routine inside the jail continued seemingly normal, two of the main characters in this story prepared to begin a journey that would last 11 days and end tragically. When the morning head count was completed, guards noticed that one of the most important prisoners was missing. Immediate searches inside the facility were conducted, but it quickly became clear Casey was no longer there. As the initial search intensified, authorities began suspecting something bigger. he might have escaped with inside help. Since Vicky also did not return to work after the supposed transport, the alarm was raised. The prison went into maximum alert mode, and the case was immediately passed on to state and federal authorities. They connected the dots. An official vehicle leaving with 2 occupants, one of whom should have been imprisoned, the simultaneous absence of a longtime officer, and the lack of reports regarding the supposed transport. Everything indicated that this had not been a legitimate operation. With that, one of the most intense manhunts in recent Alabama history began. Authorities from multiple agencies mobilized to find Casey and Vicky before they reached another state or hid in hard-to-reach rural areas. The chase had begun. By the 3rd day of the search, something crucial happened. An anonymous witness contacted the police saying they had seen the 2 in a nearby town. Teams mobilized immediately. The end of the escape seemed closer than ever. On the night of the 3rd day after the escape, an anonymous call changed the course of the investigation completely. A resident of a town in Tennessee, about 200 kilometers from Lauderdale, reported to the police having seen a man and a woman matching the physical characteristics of Casey Cole White and Vicky White. The informant said he saw them at a gas station near the exit of the main highway. According to him, the 2 seemed nervous, avoided eye contact, and were wearing discreet clothes, typical of someone trying not to draw attention. Additionally, the car they were in was different from the official vehicle used in the escape. It was an older model, possibly rented or obtained illegally, indicating they had already switched transportation since leaving the prison. The information was immediately passed on to the search teams, who began scanning the area mentioned by the witness. Security cameras were reviewed, business owners interviewed, and even residential footage was re-examined in an attempt to find any image that could confirm the couple's presence. Early the next morning, agents identified the new vehicle used by Casey and Vicky. The images clearly showed the 2 inside the car, stopping only to refuel before continuing their trip quickly. Although they had gone unnoticed for several days, that single stop was enough to give authorities their first major breakthrough in the operation. Now, they knew exactly where the couple was headed, and could plan how to intercept them. As the hours passed, investigators realized Casey and Vicky were following a strategic route, avoiding large urban centers and preferring secondary roads and rural areas. This indicated they were aware they were being searched for and were doing everything possible to stay off the radar. At the same time, the couple maintained a calm and discreet demeanor whenever they appeared in public. No merchant or employee reported aggressive or violent behavior from them, unusual, given Casey's criminal history. This behavior led many to speculate about the dynamic between the 2. Was Vicky actually afraid for her life? Or had she become emotionally involved with Casey and was determined to help him at any cost? Authorities also noticed that the couple seemed increasingly tired. In the captured images, both Casey and Vicky showed visible signs of physical exhaustion. Dark circles, tense expressions, and hurried movements were constant. It was clear that the psychological pressure of the escape was taking its toll. They knew that every kilometer traveled put them at risk of being caught. And although they were still free, the feeling of freedom was illusory. After all, they were surrounded by a net that grew tighter by the hour. Meanwhile, relatives of both parties began speaking publicly. Family members of Casey claimed in interviews that he had been manipulated by Vicky, while close friends of Vicky said she seemed confused and lost in the months leading up to the escape. Speculations increased about the relationship between the 2. Some experts suggested that Casey may have exerted some kind of psychological influence over Vicky, known as reverse Stockholm syndrome, in which the prisoner gains the trust and loyalty of their guard. Others believed it was all part of a well-planned scheme, based on mutual interests. Casey wanted to escape prison, and Vicky, for unknown reasons, decided to help him, perhaps in exchange for something only she knew. Regardless of the motive, one thing was certain: the fugitive's time was running out. With the concrete lead found at the gas station, authorities were closer than ever to ending this story definitively. On the morning of the 11th day after the escape, an emergency call to Tennessee's emergency services would completely change the course of history. A person reported having heard several gunshots coming from inside a car traveling along a rural road near the city of Evansville. Local police were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, they found an abandoned vehicle on the side of the road, with signs of a crash and bloodstains inside. 2 bodies were inside the car, a man and a woman, both seriously injured. Quickly identifying the occupants by descriptions and documents found in the vehicle, authorities confirmed. These were Casey Cole White and Vicky White. The 11-day-long hunt seemed to have finally come to an end. Medical teams were also called in and worked tirelessly to stabilize the 2 before taking them to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, Vicky's injuries were too severe, and she did not survive the emergency care. Casey, although in critical condition, was saved thanks to the quick response of paramedics and the work of hospital staff. He underwent a series of emergency surgeries and remained under police custody throughout his treatment. Vicky's death deeply shocked everyone who knew her. Friends, colleagues, and family members were stunned by the revelation that she had been involved in something so serious. Many still tried to understand what could have led her to help a prisoner escape. The investigations into what happened began immediately. How and why did the shooting happen? Was it an argument between the 2? Was there any confrontation with the police? Or was it a joint suicide? Witness statements from neighbors near the road where the car was found indicated there was no police chase. No one saw officers or heard sirens moments before the shots. This reinforced the theory that the gunfire was internal, meaning it occurred inside the vehicle itself. Forensic reports later revealed that Vicky had been shot twice, one of the shots being fatal. Casey, on the other hand, was found with only 1 bullet wound, suggesting he was the only one who fired, although this was never officially confirmed. Some experts believe Vicky tried to surrender, but Casey, fearing returning to prison, chose to shoot her and attempt suicide. Others support the hypothesis that the 2 planned the end of the escape together, perhaps as a way to escape justice. Regardless of the motivation, the result was devastating. A case already complex and unusual took on tragic tones, with the death of a public servant who dedicated decades to the prison system. Vicky's funeral was held days later, with military honors and the presence of hundreds of people who paid tribute to her career. Many mourned the tragic end of someone who devoted her life to public service. As for Casey, after physically recovering, he faced new charges, including manslaughter related to Vicky's death. His criminal record now carried not only the crime he was originally imprisoned for, but also a long list of offenses linked to the escape. He was transferred to a maximum security prison, where he would await trial for all the crimes committed. With Vicky's death, the chances of receiving any form of sentence reduction became practically zero. Thus ended one of the most shocking stories in recent American media history, an escape planned by a violent prisoner and a seasoned officer, which ended in tragedy, leaving many unanswered questions and an entire country reflecting on the limits of loyalty, manipulation, and wrong choices. After the tragic end of the escape and Vicky White's death, authorities turned their focus to another front: the legal responsibility of Casey Cole White for all the crimes committed during those 11 days. In addition to the original first-degree murder charge for the crime he was already in jail for, Casey faced new indictments, including prison escape, conspiracy with a public official, unlawful use of an official vehicle, illegal possession of a firearm, and manslaughter in relation to Vicky's death. The case was considered high severity by state and federal authorities due to the complexity of the plan, the involvement of a public employee, and the emotional impact Vicky's death had on the community. Casey was transferred to a maximum security unit in Alabama, where he would remain in custody until the day of the trial. His physical health was already recovered, but his image in society had been severely damaged. He was placed in preventive isolation for an indefinite period, both for his own safety and to prevent any attempt at manipulation or influence over other inmates. From that moment on, he was more than just a criminal. He was a symbol of one of the most shocking escapes in recent American history. Meanwhile, investigations were launched to discover whether anyone else might have helped the couple during the escape. There were strong suspicions that someone had provided the second vehicle used by the fugitives, and possibly even hidden them at some point. Despite the efforts of the authorities, no other person was formally charged or arrested for direct participation in the case. However, several individuals were questioned, including Casey's relatives and old acquaintances with criminal records. The questions kept coming. Did Vicky really plan everything alone? Did she receive external help? Or did she simply allow herself to be deceived by Casey over time? Criminal psychology and behavioral experts began to analyze the case deeply. Many suggested that Casey used advanced psychological manipulation techniques, creating an emotional bond with Vicky that led her to make irrational decisions. This type of relationship is known as reverse Stockholm syndrome, when the prisoner manages to gain the trust and loyalty of their guard. Although not common, similar cases have been recorded in other parts of the world. The media intensified its coverage of the case. Documentaries, special reports, and in-depth analyses were produced by major American channels, turning the escape into a study of human behavior and flaws in the prison system. Within the Alabama prison system itself, the case sparked a wave of changes. Security protocols were reviewed, rules regarding contact between officers and inmates were tightened, and mandatory training on identifying psychological manipulation began to be implemented. Many questioned how an experienced employee, with decades of public service, could fall into such an elaborate scheme. This raised debates about the importance of psychological support offered to correctional officers, often subjected to high-pressure environments and constant trauma. Although Vicky White was part of the escape, she also became a figure of sympathy for some segments of public opinion. To some, she seemed more like a victim than a criminal, someone who, perhaps, made the wrong decisions under great emotional influence. But regardless of interpretations, the fact remained. A life was lost. A man continued serving a sentence under even more serious charges, and a system meant to ensure internal order saw its flaws exposed to millions of eyes. And now, the entire country waited for the final judgment. After months of investigation, procedural preparation, and evidence analysis, Casey Cole White's trial was scheduled to take place in the criminal court of Lauderdale County, Alabama. The case was already widely known nationwide, and expectations were high regarding the final verdict. The judge in charge of the case emphasized from the beginning that it was an extremely sensitive judicial process, due to the seriousness of the facts involved, the emotional impact caused in society, and the involvement of a public official. Casey was formally charged with multiple crimes: premeditated murder for the original crime, prison escape, conspiracy with a correctional officer, involuntary manslaughter for his alleged involvement in Vicky White's death, illegal possession of a firearm, and unlawful use of an official vehicle. The state prosecution assembled a robust team composed of lawyers specialized in high-profile cases. Their main strategy was to demonstrate that Casey had systematically manipulated Vicky White, using her as a tool to escape justice. The defense, on the other hand, tried to present Casey as someone easily influenced, claiming he had been convinced by Vicky to participate in the escape, and that she had taken full control of the plan from the beginning. However, few people believed this version. During the trial, several witnesses were heard, including Vicky's co-workers, prison guards who had contact with Casey, family members of the victims, and even experts who analyzed the shooting scene in Tennessee. One of the most impactful witnesses was a police officer who arrived at the accident site shortly after the shooting. He described the scene vividly, reporting the presence of blood inside the car, bullet marks, and Casey's critical condition when he was found. Security camera footage from gas stations, hotels, and roads was also presented, showing the route taken by the couple in the days following the escape. These images helped reconstruct every movement of the couple during their journey. One of the most tense moments of the trial came when a psychological profile of Casey was presented. According to experts, he had personality traits associated with manipulative behaviors, pathological narcissism, and lack of empathy, characteristics typical of individuals who exert strong influence over others. Vicky's family was also present in court. They stated, in emotional testimonies, that they could never have imagined she would betray her position and abandon her values for someone with such a dark history as Casey's. Vicky's mother said that, although she felt anger toward Casey, she couldn't see him only as a villain. For her, he had exploited her daughter's emotional vulnerability, leading her to make decisions she would never make while fully conscious. Throughout the process, the media followed everything in real time. Newspapers published extracts of the trial daily, news channels broadcast excerpts live, and social networks were flooded with debates about the case. The jury, composed of 12 local citizens, spent several hours analyzing the case before delivering its verdict. The decision was unanimous. Casey Cole White was found guilty of all the charges brought against him. When the judge announced the final sentence, a wave of silence filled the courtroom. Casey was sentenced to several consecutive years in prison, with the guarantee that he would never be released on parole again. Thus, another phase of the case came to an end, the trial. But even with the sentence served, many questions remained unanswered. How could someone like Vicky fall into such a risky scheme? How far does the power of human manipulation go? And what lessons could the prison system learn from this story? After the sentencing of Casey Cole White and the formal closure of the case, many eyes turned to the American prison system, especially the Lauderdale County Jail, where it all began. The escape, unusual and well-planned, exposed serious flaws in security protocols, supervision of employees, and internal controls that should prevent any kind of complicity between officers and inmates. State and federal authorities began a complete review of procedures adopted in local and regional prisons. The goal was to identify vulnerabilities and prevent similar cases from happening again. One of the first measures was the prohibition of direct contact between inmates and staff outside the operational routine. Individual visits, private conversations, and transports conducted by only one officer were reassessed and, in many cases, banned. Additionally, stricter policies regarding the use of official vehicles within prison units were established. Now, any exit with a vehicle requires prior authorization, video recording, and a minimum of 2 officers present. Moreover, digital monitoring systems were implemented in several prisons. High-definition cameras, motion sensors, and entry and exit logs began to be used more consistently to ensure greater transparency. Another significant change was the introduction of mandatory training on psychological manipulation and identification of suspicious behaviors among correctional officers. Many officers received training to recognize signs of brainwashing or emotional influence exerted by inmates. These trainings included studies of real cases, simulations of critical situations, and even lectures by criminal psychology experts, helping officers better understand how criminals can strategically approach them. Authorities also began investing more in psychological support for officers themselves. Recognizing the high level of stress and pressure faced daily, emotional support centers were created inside prison units to offer therapy and professional guidance. Many experts pointed out that cases like Vicky White's are not the result of personal misconduct alone, but also of exhausting work environments with little emotional and mental supervision. Therefore, this new approach aims to prevent future tragedies. At the national level, the Alabama Department of Corrections announced changes in its hiring and evaluation policy for employees. All new officers now undergo more rigorous psychological tests and detailed interviews before assuming their roles. In addition, a new department was created within the prison system responsible exclusively for internal investigations. Any indication of irregularity, complicity, or violation of rules can be anonymously reported and quickly investigated. The case also sparked debates about the role of social media and digital communication inside prisons. Although Casey had no direct access to the internet, there were suspicions he may have used alternative means to communicate with Vicky before the escape. This led to a total ban on mobile devices inside prison facilities, along with the installation of signal blockers in certain strategic locations. Surveillance over inmates' phone calls was also expanded. With all these changes, the American prison system entered a new phase of modernization and control. But despite the progress, many experts warn that no prison is completely immune to human error. And as long as there is manipulation, emotional weaknesses, and opportunities, cases like this can always arise. The story of Casey Cole White and Vicky White is more than just an escape drama. It is a reflection of human complexities, the limits of loyalty, and the fragility of the mind under pressure. It shows how a man accused of violent crimes managed to manipulate someone whose job was to keep him locked up. And she, in turn, chose to abandon everything in exchange for something that, apparently, was nothing more than an illusion. The case brought up deep questions about the American prison system, the relationships between officers and inmates, and even about how trauma, loneliness, and the need for connection can influence irrational decisions. Many experts view this case as a warning. Inside prisons, where control must be absolute, there are still gaps that can be exploited by individuals skilled in psychological manipulation. Vicky, for decades, was an exemplary employee. She served the prison system with dedication, but in her final months, she seems to have made a series of decisions that put at risk not only her career but also her own life. Casey, on the other hand, continues to serve his sentence in a solitary cell, now with an even heavier criminal record. His story serves as a dark example of the power some people have to transform realities with empty words and promises. The media, by covering the case, helped make it a global phenomenon. Documentaries, reports, and psychological analyses emerged in the weeks following the escape, each trying to answer the same question. How did this happen? Perhaps the answer lies less in the how and more in the why. Why would an experienced person get involved? Why would someone risk everything for a criminal? And why are so many of us fascinated by stories like this? This morbid curiosity says a lot about human nature. We are drawn to extreme stories because they make us question our own limits, our choices, and our ability to resist pressure. The case also showed how technology and security systems, no matter how advanced, can never replace the human factor. It's easy to plan protocols, but difficult to predict human behavior when under altered emotional or mental influence. After Casey's conviction and the institutional changes in the prison system, many hope cases like this can be avoided in the future. But while there are weaknesses, failures, and opportunities, there will always be room for surprises. Today, the Lauderdale County Jail has new controls, updated cameras, and mandatory training. But the name of Vicky White is still remembered with a mix of sadness and bewilderment by those who knew her. If you made it this far, you're probably reflecting on this story just as much as I am. You might have been left with unanswered questions, or maybe you thought, would I have acted differently? That's the power of true stories. They touch us, scare us, intrigue us, and sometimes they teach us. And that's why we continue to share them, analyze them, and seek to understand what really happened. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to receive notifications of new videos. There are more real, intriguing, and unbelievable stories coming, and you can't miss any of them.